So this is my talk. We're doing it live, broadcasting on the web with HLS and DASH. So my last two talks were about WebRTC, which is a fairly modern API for building video conferencing apps in the browser. We talked about how it works locally, as well as how to sort of stream audio and video data over the web between people. Now, WebRTC is really cool, and a lot of folks who are into JavaScript are aware of it, at least somewhat, because it's one of the coolest things you can do in the browser. But it does have some drawbacks. So here's a demo that I did earlier today. So WebRTC compresses your video a lot. It achieves less than a second of latency, which is important for video conferencing. But it's not the best if you want high quality, and it's also not the best if you have a lot of people in the audience. So, if you want to stream to like hundreds or thousands of people, or even like more than a dozen people, WebRTC starts to become very complicated very quickly. Other sites like Twitch or YouTube or Facebook Live or Periscope, they're able to have higher quality live streaming because they don't need to have such low latency. Like if they have 10 or 30 seconds of latency, that's fine. That's a trade-off they're willing to make in return for getting higher quality. And so today we'll be talking about HLS and DASH, which are two of the technologies that have been in use actually a lot longer than WebRTC. And because they're a bit older and a little bit less fancy, they don't get talked about as much, but they're actually really cool because they allow you to do like some really advanced video stuff with like just a static web server with no, server hosting at all. So a lot of the stuff I'm going to talk about today is stuff that you can do with just static web hosting. And by the end, we're going to build a private Twitch server that you could use to broadcast live video to thousands of people at once using nothing more than a Node.js server and an S3 bucket. So all the examples that I'm going to be going over today, I'm going to have a GitHub repository if you want to check them out. And I'll have links to all of that at the end that I'll post in the chat and then the Slack, etc. I'm also going to note that we're going to get into some complicated stuff, but I'm going to try and start simple. And again, one thing to bear in mind is that for a lot of this stuff, we can do it with just a static web server. So it's demo time. All right. Real quick, this is an example of like HTTP live streaming in practice. This is Twitch. This is a live stream. It's 1080p. I think it's 60 frames a second. And, this is what, you can do with these kinds of technologies. And there's my GitHub repo. So, all right, let's begin. We're going to start with the basic video element. So as simple as it gets when it comes to video. And just so that you can tell there's nothing up my sleeve, I'm going to start a static web server here. And in case you want to double check, start static, just starts HTTP server port 8712. And then we're going to go to that web server. And here is a piece of video playing with a basic video element. So the basic video element on its own, it's fairly simple. It's a lot like an image element in that you pass it a source, which is a URL for the video that you want to play. You can pass in a width and a height if you'd like to. There's also this attribute controls if you want to have like play and pause buttons and a scrubber bar and things like that. If you want to have your video autoplay, you also have to make sure that it's muted for reasons. And you can also do things like loop the video and stuff like that. So this is fairly simple, fairly easy to set up. It's pretty cool. This is great if you have like, some sort of a, portfolio that you're setting up for somebody or a personal website. This is a great way to host video. You can throw this all up on a static web host, just this HTML file and this folder with a MP4 in it. And there you go. But if you want to do some of the more complicated stuff that is possible in video, you're going to need to take a bit of a more advanced approach. So some of the things you might want to do that you can't do this way are things like what's called adaptive bitrate streaming. So that's where, someone's downloading part of your video and you realize like, oh no, their connection is too slow to download this 1080p video. In that case, you might want to try and serve them a lower resolution video instead. Or there's things like live streaming. This works great, this approach here, if you're doing, a pre-recorded piece of video, but if the video file hasn't finished being made yet, you can't exactly just serve it up like this. So in order to enable adaptive bitrate streaming or live streaming or any of that other stuff, we're going to need to get into more advanced, video things. So basically, a lot of the stuff that we're going to need to do is going to involve media source extensions. So this is a fairly newish web API. It came out, I think, around like the early 2010s. And basically what this allows you to do is take a video element and it doesn't care where you get the video from. It just lets you pump video data in on like a ongoing basis. So here we've got a video element with no source. And if we've got a video element and it's got no source attribute, well, we could use WebRTC and use a media stream, or we could use this new thing. Now, I'm going to note that media source extensions are actually a pretty advanced topic. I'm not going to go too in depth on them in this talk, because although they are foundational to how this stuff works, generally you're going to want to use a library or something like that to do this for you. But it's good to know, just in a passing way, like how this works. And again, if this is interesting to you, check out the GitHub repo, and I've got this code in there if you want to play with it on your own. So we've got this video element here, and unlike the last time, we're not going to set a source with a URL. Instead, we're going to detect if the browser supports media sources and if it supports this particular codec, which most of them do. And if it does, we're going to create a new media source. Now, this is different from the media streams from WebRTC. This is more for like the stuff that we're doing today. We're going to set that media source as the source of the video. And then once it's ready to start receiving video data, we're going to create a source buffer, which is the thing that we use to sort of pump the video data in. We're going to fetch the video file. We're going to turn it into a JavaScript array buffer and pump it into the media source's source buffer thing. Once the source buffer is done slurping down all that video, we're going to say, hey, all right, media source, that's the end of the stream. Start playing the video. And let's see this thing in action. There it is. So this is pretty similar to what we were just doing. We're just getting a MP4 file off of our server and playing it. You can still do this with a static web server. Now, if you want to do those more advanced things, you're not going to be able to do it with just a single video file. Let's think about it for a moment here. If you wanted to swap out, the 1080p version of the video for the 360p version of the video, the lower resolution version, you would probably want to divide the video up into chunks. And that's exactly what YouTube and other places do when they do that kind of behavior, is they take the video that people upload to them and they chop it up into chunks, and they give you only the chunks that you need at this moment. And then if you scrub to somewhere else in the timeline, they load those chunks. And there's a whole system around, how do you chop up a video into chunks? And how do you know the names of all of those chunks? And those systems are, here we go, HLS and DASH. So a minute ago, I was saying that, we have to chop the video up into chunks and then have a playlist that tells us the names of those chunks. Both of these are ways of doing that. HTTP live streaming, or HLS, was created by Apple. They have opened the standard. It is an open standard that anybody is free to implement. It's not patent encumbered or anything like that. And but they do have a fair amount of control over the standard. So when they wanted to add like low latency support, that's something that they've done themselves, and they have control over how that moves forward. The other option is dynamic adaptive streaming over HTTP, or MPEG-DASH, which was created by the Motion Picture Experts Group, or MPEG. And this is a bit more open in that it's generally sort of created and maintained through consensus rather than through what Apple wants. They both have positives, they both have negatives. I'm going to focus mostly on HLS because I like their playlist format more, but it's actually pretty easy to make a streaming server that supports both of these, and it's a pretty good idea to do so. So going back over here, let's take a look at what we're going to do next. We're going to do a statically hosted video stream. We're still dealing with things that only need a static host and only need like pre-recorded video. So we've got our test footage. The FFmpeg test footage is what I've been showing you, this MP4 file. And we're going to do something different now. We're going to have this page, and we're going to play this video here. So on our new page, we're loading up Video.js and the Video.js HTTP streaming plugin. Video.js is the library that I recommend for doing this kind of work. It's very well supported. It's been around for a very long time, basically since like the birth of HTML5 video. And it's got lots of cool plugins like this that you can load on the fly as you need them for things like HLS or DASH. In this case, this is what I would recommend doing. And so as you can see here, we're just going to create a Video.js player, and we're going to pass it a source, and then we're going to tell it to play. But this source, this URL here, this isn't like the other ones. It's not an MP4. It's this other file type called M3U8. So what's that? It's not a, I'll give you a hint, it's not a video file. It's this. The M3U8 file extension might seem a bit weirdly familiar to some people. It's actually the format that's used by iTunes for playlists. And it's also the format that was used back in the day for Winamp for playlists. And basically it's just a text file that says these are the names of the chunks and this is how long each of them is. They're each 4 seconds, and then this one down here at the end is 2 seconds. It's got a little bit of metadata about the version of HLS that we're on, and at the end it's got a directive saying like, hey, this is where the list ends. So what's going to happen is Video.js is going to fetch this playlist file. It's going to parse it and look at all of these, names of the files that are in the playlist, and it's going to pull as many of them as it needs to keep playing the video. And if we scrub around, it'll grab whatever ones we need for that part of the video, etc. So if I go over here, and let's take a look at the network tab for this one. So we're watching that same FFmpeg test footage as I was mentioning before. And as you can see over here, every few seconds, we get another stream. And this little bar advances just a little bit. I'll refresh the page so you can see it again. You can see the bar is like slowly advancing as we pull another chunk every few seconds. So this is basically, if you wanted to do adaptive streaming, there are other directives that you could put in your, M3U8 file that would say like, hey, use this one for lower resolution, stuff like that. That's something that if you're interested in adaptive bitrate, I would recommend looking into it. So that's all that we need for this. Now, what the thing is though, at the beginning of this talk, I said that we're going to do a private Twitch server, and I do not intend on disappointing. So how is that going to work? How are we going to get from here to a live stream? Well, take a look at the bar right now. We've got a pause button, etc. Remember that. And I'm just going to take out this little line right here. And I'm going to refresh. Hey, it's live. It's live. And we started at 51 seconds in. What's going on here? And look over here. We keep fetching the playlist over and over again. Stream.m3u8. Oh, now it froze because this isn't actually a live stream. I've fooled the browser into thinking it's a live stream. So what happened here is that in these M3U8 files, if you don't have this x endless directive at the end, then what that says to the browser is, hey, this is a live stream. It hasn't ended yet. And just to make it easier to understand, this is a live stream. It hasn't ended yet. These are the last few chunks. You should probably grab these and start playing them. And keep fetching this file over and over and over again. And at some point, it might be different. There might be a stream15.m4s in there. And so that's basically all that you need to do a live stream is you do this same playlist format, just without an ending. And then you just keep updating this file whenever you've got new chunks to show the user. So, all right, that explains how a live stream can work, in the browser. The next thing is, okay, we're going to need something to update this playlist file and something to make new chunks. And at this point, we have reached the end of what we can do with a static web server. We're going to need to actually start up our Node.js server over here. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to do npm start. And now we're running. Okay, so in this case, we started, let's take a look at what's in this file. So there's an npm package called Node Media Server that I highly recommend, and I'll have a link to it at the end. This is a great package that basically allows you to set up an all-purpose kind of like media transcoding and broadcasting kind of server that uses the same protocols we were just talking about. So it uses FFmpeg under the hood, so you will need to install FFmpeg first, and these couple lines of code will find where FFmpeg is because we'll need it for later. And then we just have this config object here. We pass it into the constructor and run it, and that's it. Just one file. Now what's in this config? So right here we've got a config for a static HTTP web server. It's going to be on port 8000. We've got this live streams folder, which you got right here. It's currently empty because we don't have any streams yet. And that's where we're going to write all of our live stream, all of our playlists and chunk files to this folder. We've also got the root of the static web server, which is this public folder, which is the same as we had before. Then down here, we've got this transcoding thing. And up here, we've got this RTMP thing. So when we go to stream, we're going to use a program that I'll show you in a moment called OBS. And it sends video in a format, in a protocol called RTMP, the real-time messaging protocol. This is a very old protocol. It was created by Macromedia in the year 2000 for use as like a video streaming thing in Flash. It is not great for use in browsers. It's not great for delivering media to consumers, but it's really good for taking video that's on your computer and like sending it to Twitch or something like that. The RTMP like normal port that it uses is 1935. This is all just some configuration stuff. I'll get into how we're going to send this thing a stream in just a moment. Once it starts receiving a stream though, we'll have this thing called live, which we'll get to in a moment. We're going to transcode for HLS and DASH. As I said, this is actually pretty easy to support both of them at the same time. If we want, we can also make a recording as an MP4. I'm going to leave that commented out for now. And then over here, this is our page. Again, pretty simple. We use video.js. We're going to create a video.js player. We're going to pass it a URL for our playlist, which doesn't exist yet, but it will very soon. And then we're off to the races. So I've talked about how it's going to show up on the user screen. I've talked about how it's going to get converted. Now, we talked about step 3. Step 3. We talked about step 2. Now, how do we record and send the video to this server? We're going to need OBS. So this is OBS right here. It's a pretty commonly used streaming application used by it's open source, it's free, it's used by some of the biggest Twitch streamers around, and it's pretty easy to set up. I've got a thing here that's recording my screen. I can also, if I go over to here and disable my camera, I can then include my camera as well. Hey, there I am. So this is just like a game stream or something like that, where I've got my camera in the corner, I've got my screen elsewhere, and I'm going to go to settings, stream. I'm going to go to rtmp://localhost/live. Remember, our app's name is live, so that's why we have to do that. And just because I've got it hard coded elsewhere, my stream key is just my-stream. So if you go and try and use this on your own, just bear that in mind. Make sure that your settings page looks exactly like this. So hit OK. I'm going to hit Start Streaming. And now, I'm going to move this over here. If I go over here, you can see I've got some new stuff in the logs. Join stream, handle audio, handle video. We're streaming to /live/mystream. Cool, looks good. And then if I go to the website, oh, hold on. Now I need to be going to port 8000. I have them on different ports in case you ever want to run both of them at the same time. And here's our live stream. It is about 10 seconds delayed. As you can see, we are every few seconds fetching the playlist again, and then we fetch another chunk, because each time that we fetch the playlist, there's a new chunk listed in the playlist. And as you can see, you know, we're now getting to the point where I started opening this page, and then the video on the page is starting to get to the point where I open this page. So you can see that there's about a 10-second delay in here. But if you're cool with a 10-second delay, this is 1080p, and it's this is 1080p, and it is 60 frames a second, so it's pretty smooth. I don't know if that's coming across in Google Meet. Hopefully, it'll come across in the YouTube video. And so that's basically it. And again, if you can jerry-rig this thing so that instead of putting it in a folder called live streams, which is right here, if instead you get it to put this stuff in a folder that's somewhere on S3, now you've got a streaming server, and it'll just, you know, keep writing to these files. You can put a CDN like Cloudflare in front of it, or, you know, whatever you'd like there. And you can host this for basically like probably less than $1. At a certain point, if you try and scale up really high, some of your CDNs might start to complain, or you might just run into other sort of scaling issues. And in that case, there's a project that I recommend that I'll also have a link to called Streamline. This is basically if you want to take things a step further and start doing like production quality streams. Streamline is a tool. It's basically a tutorial on the kinds of hardware that you'll need, the kinds of, you know, infrastructure you would need to set up. But if you're not trying to be like the NFL or something like that, you can get a lot done with this. And you can host all kinds of live events for free, and anybody in any browser can see it, which is pretty magical and something that I don't think a lot of people are aware that you can do. So with that being said, that's the end. Thanks for watching.